It's my pleasure to introduce Jared. Brooke and I work together on many different facets of this industry, and Jared was a very interesting person to get to know. And so we're really happy to have Jared join us for this webinar. So Jared, the floor is yours. We're going to ask a few questions along the way, but we want you to start off and kind of explain who you are, how you got to here, and why you're on this damn webinar.
Yeah, so my name is Jared Mauch. I own, as I tell all the neighbors and folks around me, I own the local fiber-based, internet provider around, around the small area around my house. I went and spent a long time, suffering like many people who are just on the edge of, the city and such. Just living the dream right on the edge of suburbia and next to the farms. And yeah, I've been in this house for 20 years now, and didn't have good internet access and kept trying different ideas, different routes of trying to solve that problem, trying to figure things out, and ultimately ended up having to do it myself. Nobody else was going to build out in this area. And so it ultimately came down to, well, I guess it, almost why not me, or, I guess it has to be me. So I ended up building, starting off with something small, building, a couple miles, of fiber and conduit to go and tap into where I could buy internet access from another company. And, since then it's kind of taken off, and it has a little bit of it's gotten to have a little bit of a mind and uncontrolled thing of its own, to some extent, but it's really taken off in the past couple of years. So that's the high level start. So
yeah, so what gave you the confidence that you could do it? Like, what was the starting point for like, yeah, you know what, I can do this?
So I had like I've been doing computers and networking since, like for a very long time. I've been on the internet since about, almost 30 years, in various different forms. And, I've worked for, either other telecommunication companies. I've worked in the industry since, the dial-up days and ISDN and the early days of DSL and the early days of like, the DOCSIS, the cable modem standards and such. And over time, I'd risen to go and work at companies that ran and operated a global network. And so we would buy dark fiber from people, go and light them up with DWDM systems and stuff like that. So I got a great deal of information and confidence in how to piece, all the parts together in order to make it happen. On top of that, I spent a lot of time driving and kind of dreaming, like staring out the car window, looking at stuff, finding where all the infrastructure was around me. Some people like to, do bird watching and stuff like that. And I can drive down the road, I can find the little matchsticks and poles and fuses and, and look at a pole and tell you about how old it is based on, how green it is versus, how rotted out or something it looks. And so, I spent a lot of time with that. And, I'd spent some of my, historical either bonus money or fund money, fund budget money, and buying, just the toys and tools you would need for that. So I bought, a fusion splicer, probably I bought my first one probably about 6-7 years ago now and stuff like that. And then, toyed around with kind of, okay, this is how to make it work. And, and ultimately now, I probably have somewhere between, probably almost 20 miles of fiber network that I'm responsible for.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you have a lot of the knowledge and the context that is needed to kind of start all of this. You also have the motivation. Like you said, you were driving down the road and just dreaming about the possibilities. But the third component I see is, that first action step. You can dream all day and have all the motivation in the world to do a big project like this. But what was that first action step that got you started?
I think like anything else, I finally decided, okay, I'm really serious about doing this. So I went and, I formed the company, I went and I started down the route of getting all the paperwork in place and, hired somebody to do the drawings and permits and, and probably the funniest initial conversation was with my rep Antoine here, who I see on here. I show up and I'm like, hey, so this is what I'm trying to do, and that was one of the big connector points that really kind of got me into position. So it's like, okay, you need to, really getting that supply list together, understanding what what I would need to actually piece together for a budget, so that way I could go and actually figure out, okay, some people go and will spend money remodeling their house to make it perfect. I instead of moving or buying that, we decided to go and take that type of money and put it into infrastructure in the ground, and got permits, hired contractors, bought a bunch of stuff from Millennium, and still keep getting stuff. And it's it's crazy to think about the first time I picked up just a few things, and now I've got a huge pile of empty reels sitting there, from all the conduit that's been used. It's really something where comparing then showing up and buying stuff and loading it in a little Prius, like grabbing it and throwing supplies in the back of a Prius, to what it is now. It's a big contrast.
So I was going to ask, so you start off the business with a Prius for real, or you just use it as a reference?
For real. It's this little blue Prius, I have photos I've shared like in other talks and stuff about this, where literally have a stack of handholds in the back of the Prius. That is literally what happened. And we're sitting there with like the guys in the warehouse trying to figure out, okay, how do I fit all these in? And they're just kind of looking at it like, oh, I don't think this is gonna work, and made it fit and got it going. It's definitely
So on that note, is there anything that you would have done differently had you known what you know now?
I think I spent a lot of time doing my research, like in advance. I think probably the only thing that I would do differently is I would probably have started out with higher fiber counts on some of my routes, and actually put in even more conduit than I initially did. So I started off, I started off like, I think, a lot of people kind of thinking, okay, I'm trying to pinch pennies on a budget and stuff like that. And I was originally only going to put one conduit in on all of my routes that got built. Ultimately, I ended up putting two in because I did the math, and it came out to about an extra 60 cents a foot in labors and material. Which on the initial, 12,000 foot project, when you're talking about, $5,000-6,000, of a big project, it ends up being a smaller sum of money, comparatively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And because I did that let me go back and, when another company was building in the area or was looking to build in the area, and I caught the person who was doing all the field work for the design for that, I was able to go and tie in with them and provide them some middle mile fiber on a route that they were trying to figure out how they were going to build. And through that, we've got a good, I got some fiber out of that. They got some fiber out of it. We did a swap, and now that got me to some additional areas, which is interesting, because then, my county went and put up, because there's all the different funding programs out there, from like CAF 1, CAF 2 to the RDOF to, the COVID money that was out there. County went and put up a bunch of stuff for bid. And I actively communicated with them on what I was building, but I was able to go and light up some of, and serve some of the addresses that were on the list with that fiber swap as well. So, including lighting up, one of the local businesses that sells all the, sells all the high pressure hoses and hydraulics parts and stuff like that to all the farmers out here, which is great, because they really needed something. And with the copper sharing agreements going by the wayside, the companies that they were buying from weren't able to get access to that copper plant anymore.
Right. So, Jared, as you're talking about, budget and all of these things that you have to buy in order to start up your network, how did you get everything started with funding from the start? You go in with nothing. You're starting a brand new business from the bottom. How do you get started with funding? Do you have to self-source it? Did you get government funding? How did you sort of start all of this with money?
So I went in, and basically from the self-source perspective, and I went and I sent letters, on paper with stamps and everything to all the people on the, along the way that, on the route where I was going to build that first year. And all that money that came, directly from me, for that initial piece. And so, went and built that. And, when I went along, I had talked to other, ISPs who had done this before, and they told me about the different models that they had. I spent endless hours talking to people doing research and just figuring out what worked. And, there were a couple different models that folks proposed, but the one that worked it wanted to go and ask people to prepay some sum of money, and then based on how much they prepaid, they would basically get that money as a discount on their service for a number of years in the future. So one person wrote me a check for about $5,000, or wrote a check for $5,000, which was great, because that gave the opportunity to do that. And then they got, $50 a month off of their bill for the first 100 months of service, which, it sounds like a long time, but, it's not uncommon for somebody to go and say, oh, well, I'm going to get a car loan, and I'll get 60 months or 72 months or something like that.
Right.
And so, when you're talking about, okay, now they're paying maybe, $15 a month for their internet access, and giving, and basically, them understanding, yeah, it's a bunch of money up front for this, and then over time they're gonna get an extended discount on their service. That really ended up being one of the ways. For the second year, so it's interesting. So I finished building it in the first year, and I got this message from a friend of mine, and he said, hey, I think it's his niece or something. It's like, my niece bought a house nearby you. And I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, and gave me the name of this road that's really long, 10 plus miles long, and, when you're in a town like Ann Arbor, 10 miles is, perhaps all the way across the town, all the way across everything. Well, as it turns out, she was moving kind of close. And so they bought this farm, and they were looking to get internet access out there. The local telephone company, the incumbent that does, regular, dial tone type services, they apparently gave them a quote for $5,000 to build fiber out there. And I basically was like, that's great if you can get it. Let me know if that works. Because I haven't had luck. And eventually they found out, no, that wasn't the case. They couldn't get fiber services there. And they were similarly well off. And so I went, I did the math. I figured out what it would cost to build it. I looked at both aerial and underground as an option. And, to this date, I've done everything underground, just because it's actually a lot. It costs not much more upfront. And, there's a lot of good reasons to do that. But as a result of going and building out to them, I got about half the people, once again, about half the people along the way, or the homes that got passed, they signed up for service. And this person went and they wrote a check for basically all the construction labor, and I wrote the check for all the materials, which is a very, is very, that construction labor is the big piece of it. And so, we have a special arrangement there, but, for what they get. But, aside from that, so from there, then, you know, my county had been doing a number of studies to figure out, okay, like who doesn't have broadband, and they had put stuff up for bid. And then eventually I was like, well, you know, I'll bid on the stuff that's nearby on the list. And they said, no, please bid on the full project. And it's like 4,000 plus addresses. And so once again, I spent a lot of windshield time driving around, looking at all of these addresses, trying to figure out what was going on, and how, you know, and what it would take to go and service all these people. And so, you know, I took all my knowledge from, you know, year one and part of year two of doing this, of, you know, this is what it costs to do things. This is my cost and materials, and such, and spent a lot of time just figuring out, okay, well, how much would I need? How, you know, and just pricing that all out, and, you know, doing what anyone has to do. You put it in a spreadsheet and you start adding up all the numbers, you make all your formulas and piece it together. So it's, you know, it's a lot of hard work piecing together all of that business part. I would say that's probably the hardest part of it all, is kind of, you know, getting that part of it done. The technical piece, at least for me, is, you know, relatively easy. You configure the equipment, you get it set up, and once that's up and going, you know, as long as no animal chews on the cable, or, which, you know, had a couple of, you know, I installed fiber in this one person's barn where their cows are, and, you know, cows and manure is an additive system, so they just go and they, you know, they take care of business where they are, and so they keep getting tall. You know, unless you remove it, the cows essentially get taller. And they eventually got high enough that they chewed on the Cat5 that went to, you know, that went and provided the connection to the wireless router that was in there. And so it's, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, yeah, you get the animals who damage, you know, a few of the things, but for the most part, it's, if you build it right, the first time, it's going to last a long time, and you don't have to do a lot of maintenance after that.
On that note, what is like the one thing you would tell somebody thinking about getting into this business, what they have to do? Like, what is the number one thing that they have to do to even start thinking about a plan or an idea of building a network?
I think that, you know, the first thing is be very realistic and be very honest with people. I think it's easy to get caught up in the marketing, you know, even the self-marketing, right? And you know, when you're starting a business and doing things, you have to convince not only yourself that you're doing it and doing the right thing, but you have to be able to convince other people. But at the same time, being honest with them. So I got a call yesterday from, you know, representative of this, one of the areas that I need to build to on the list. And they said, hey, you know, we're calling around everyone trying to figure out what the status is, you know, who's supposed to either be building broadband into our area or something like that. And I'm like, honestly, I don't have an estimate for you, because, you know, we're currently focused building on another area. I know there's another provider building nearby them right now. And I said, you know, you should try and sign up with them. You know, we'll get there eventually, but, you know, we can only build so fast. You know, you can only turn those permits into the field work into drawings, into permits, into materials so fast. You know, I had a company, you know, when I was talking to folks about construction, they said, oh yeah, you know, we could go and we could build it all for you in a month. You know, like they had the scale to do that. And to some extent, that would be great. Just go out and build it all in a month and be done, and then maybe go do something else. But you know, you also have to not go so fast that you can't can't scale up your business, you know, in the same way. So the fact that you know, I grew in the first year, you know, I got, you know, 30, 40, 50 customers. Now I'm sitting up around, you know, in the mid to high 70s or so. And, you know, I'm talking about having to build past, you know, another 600 to 800, you know, properties, right now. And so when you start talking about, okay, that's how much I need to do, because I think there's 414 addresses on my list that I need to build to. And then all the people who I pass along the way. And so that's, you know, that's much bigger, but it's not, you know, not completely an order of magnitude bigger, but it's somewhere, where you're not, adding a 0 times 10 or whatever, but it's a lot more homes that I'm going to be passing, because right now I pass, but before all that expansion construction, passed about 120, 130 homes or so.
So, I mean, it sounds like you have a lot on your plate. You have a lot that you're building, but as you know, from previous conversations, I know this isn't your only job. You are building and running this ISP, but you also, have another job that you are doing at the same exact time, which is incredible. So, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, this is the fun part where I say, I'm incredibly realistic with people. I say, yeah, this is not my only job. This is literally my night job. I'll be out, splicing fiber, making connections, doing stuff, in the evening and stuff like that. I ask people when I go to their house, I'm like, is 10 o'clock too late for me to be there to hook you up to internet? And when they're going from satellite to fiber, they're like, I will stay up till 10 o'clock to get internet. But in my day job, the Clark Kent version of it, since some people have said that I should wear a cape, which, I believe in the Incredibles no capes thing, but there's in my daytime, I'm sort of on the other side of the, flip side of the equation. So I work for this company called Akamai Technologies, and we are one of the content delivery networks that hosts a variety. We run a global network where we deliver content and software updates and downloads and stuff like that, and video streaming for a bunch of different services and customers globally. So I do that during the daytime, and try and keep that up, try and keep that going, designing and architecting our global network there. And then, and then I spend time thinking about, okay, how do I build, on the flip side of it, how can I make sure that my customers are getting, very good connectivity to those same software updates and downloads, which is, the stuff that I was struggling with, on my old wireless connection is, I wanted to be able to consume the same streaming media stuff that everyone else was able to, and I wasn't able to. And the timing of my stuff was really great and advantageous for me and my family, because I got the fiber activated to my house ultimately a couple days before school started up. Towards that beginning of, that first school year, that first fall for the pandemic. And so there I was able to, get this live, and, with the kids at the house, they were all able to do Zoom school and stuff from that.
I was starting to think you put them to work.
I did some of that too. I've got a couple kids, and they've definitely helped me out with, with things when you're debugging the fiber, and I text the kid at home. I'm like, hey, can you go move this fiber cable or something like that? And stuff like that. But it was very funny, because I got this nice fast connection, and then the bandwidth limitations within my house started to become a thing, because the kids were home and doing Zoom school, and we now actually had fast internet. My sons would go and download games, and when that happened, that would cause the WebEx or whatever I was on for work to stutter a little bit. So I ended up having to upgrade my home network a little bit better to support when they were doing that as well. So so they weren't going and hogging all of my bandwidth. Some people said I should have kicked them off the network, but they figured out we've got Ethernet ports in a few rooms in the house that I had wired up a long time ago, and they figured out if they plugged in, they would have a gigabit connection to the internet.
So how much of that do you take care of with your clients then? I mean, obviously, ISPs go pretty far into the home anymore, and do you have the capacity to, help them out in their homes?
Yeah, so I try to stay mostly out of the home network management right now, because the systems that I'm using today, don't give me a lot of visibility into what's going on there. I'm getting ready to, I've been looking at another platform from the optical side, for going from the GPON based system that I'm using today to go to something that does GPON plus XGS-PON in the future. So once I go to that, that system will allow me to have better network management and visibility into the home. So I can go and identify what's going on. But one of the things I like, because time is money and time is valuable, and back to the whole this is my second job. One of the strategies I've taken on this is I tell the customers, I send out these email updates, like once a week or twice a week of these project updates. And one of the things I say is listen, a wired connection is always superior to a wireless one for all your devices. And so I offer to them, I say, basically, I'll give you the Cat5 cable for free for running in the house. You run the cable in the house, and I'll put the connectors on it. And I'll buy from, I've got boxes full of patch cords I bought from Monoprice, and all of the termination jacks and stuff and faceplates from Monoprice. And I'll basically give that away for free as part of making sure that they've got an excellent service. And so I tell them, do this, make sure it's all wired up. And one of the families that I connected, I just connected, I think it's an uncle or something that's related to somebody else who's had service for about a year. And they were like, they've got a big house. There's, that has a couple different generations, but also, a couple different portions of the family, like them, the wife, the kids, they just all live together. It's actually, it's kind of interesting in these days, because not a lot of that happens. People want to flee the nest and whatever, but they've got a different family than I think some of us, but we wanted to get away, and such, and spread our wings, and and they've stayed close together, and they're like, yeah, we can stream six different things all at once with the service. Because they've got that place wired up nicely. So it's, you just hand them off the connection. But thankfully, a lot of the customers have been pretty sophisticated as far as that goes. I've been lucky to this point, because I know that's not always going to be the case.
On that note, have you had anything really interesting to happen when you've been working with clients that maybe you haven't shared with some of the other,
Since your clients are your neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of interesting things. People have tried to bribe me with, like, this one woman, she keeps sending me messages being like, come on over, I'll make you a nice Italian meal with meatballs and stuff. You can get internet to my house. I've had, people offer me eggs, and, like anyone who has chickens, because a lot of these areas are, a bit more rural. So that, I'd say a decent percentage of the people, they have chickens, or their neighbor has chickens, right? So, I get everything from fresh eggs to, to whatever else offered to me. And I was like, yeah, we'll get there. It takes time. It's one of those things, it takes time to get all this stuff built out. That's, I think, to one of your earlier questions as well, that's, I think, one of the things I would tell the younger version of myself, a few years back, is like, be a little bit more patient. It's definitely going to take some time to get all of this done.
Yeah. And so with that, what does the future hold for you? Are you planning on expanding your network, applying for additional, broadband funding? I talk to clients all day long about, well, there's BEAD, there's Reconnect, there's state available funding, there's broadband grants like crazy right now. Are you planning on applying for additional funding? Are you planning on expanding to more counties or more homes? What does the future hold for you?
So the future right now, and this is the exact same thing I tell people when they call me up and they want me to expand to their area as well, is I say, listen, I've got about 38 miles I need to build. That's going to keep me busy through the end of 23. Right now, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do after that. But there's this thing that I call the next home problem, right? Is that So I've got an address list. I need to build to all of those homes, and you end up having the person who's literally the next house over, you know, just outside of that coverage area. That's what that woman is, who's offering me, you know, a nice fine cooked Italian, you know, with meatballs and everything, like a nice, really amazing cooked dinner. And you know, she's the next house, right? And so she's just literally the next house. And so it's like, okay, how can I design and how can I adjust my network such that, you know, I'm able to hit that person and get them service. And so as you do this, you know, as the radius of the network grows, the number of next houses increases from that perspective.
Just a little ripple effect. Yeah.
It's absolutely that case. So I went from, you know, I had probably 2.5, 3 miles of network to start, you know, at the end of year one, to now I'm somewhere around, you know, between 14 to 18. I've got a bunch that's, you know, they're out literally boring today. And so I'm not sure how many feet they built today, but I know they built more. So, you know, I can't keep track of it right now. I haven't gone back and counted it up and measured it. So, you know, the future for me, I'm going to build the stuff that I've committed to build. And then because there are all of the, you know, a bunch of these programs and some of them overlap, my goal is, I do have a short-term goal of being the first mover to go and get in a lot of these environments. I want to be the first one in with the service, you know, and look at ways and places where I can close the gap, you know, close those gaps to that next house and find approaches that work. The one approach I found works well from a private funding perspective is, and this worked well for me last year, is I ended up building almost a whole extra mile of network by doing this. I offered to people, I said, I can absolutely build to you and permit this section, but, you know, it's that labor cost, that's the lion's share of it. So I told people, I said, listen, you know, I don't care how you divide it up, but this, you know, I need people to call me and tell me I'm willing to pledge this amount of money. Like, I'm not going to ask you for the money until I build it. But, you know, once we hit that point where we're going to do it, you know, then yeah, start sending me some checks. And figured out, but I said, this is a 100% service credit for you. You get a free install and it counts as 100% service credit at your address. And so I had people offer anywhere from, you know, 1 year's worth of service, which, you know, is $900 or something, to prepay for a year, you know, up to people who offered, you know, $4,000, $5,000, $8,000, you know, to be able to get connected. And so, you know, I'm looking for those opportunities, but also not everybody can do that, you know, from that perspective. So my goal right now is to build stuff. I'm busy for at least another year, based on my math. I don't know, maybe my, you know, my current contractor who's building stuff they're making a lot more progress than I expected. So, you know, I'm you know, things are going really well. They're enjoying working for me, and I'm enjoying the work they're doing for me. So it may be that I get done early and I'll look at other stuff. But our county funding program was to fund everything that wasn't already kind of covered by an existing program. So it wasn't covered by either the prior CAFs or RDOF 1 or RDOF 2. That was their gap filling project. And that's what I built. You know, that's what I did. So in our area, we're not going to have any, you know, addresses that are available for the BEAD funding. But I'm also not sure how far out I want to build. And knowing some of these other companies are going to be building in nearby, you know, I don't have the scale that some of them have to go and, you know, from a capital perspective and otherwise to go and build in. Because some of them are like electric companies, you know, or the big companies like a Comcast or a Charter.
Did you ask the county if they would consider funding the CAF areas, since that didn't have the same requirements as like the fiber builds that we're, you know, seeing now?
So I didn't specifically ask them for that, but one of the areas that because I went through about, I think it was 3 or 4 different iterations of address lists they gave me. So because I went and I turned in a bid for building the entire county, just based on where my existing network was, and figured out how to connect all of those addresses and those parcels, you know, in that initial list. And one of the things that they did is they also talked to everybody who had received either CAF or RDOF money for different services. And they actually added some addresses into the list later on that were originally funded through one of those other programs where one of the companies was supposed to build with a, you know, with wireless service. And they went and put those addresses and added those to the overall address list. You know, throughout the time, because they figured out like they wanted to coordinate because they were trying to do a gap filling program, right? They wanted to fund the places that weren't going to be built and provide that. And so they went and they talked to everyone. I happened to get a few more addresses because I know some of them that were originally committed to another company that was going to build in wirelessly that did not happen or wasn't going to happen in time. So I have, you know, I'm trying to build out to that area right now.
That's cool.
I'll just, you know, okay, it was a long iterative process. It took over a year, almost exactly a year or over a year from the time that I got the original bid. You know, I turned in the original response to the time that, you know, I had a signed contract in hand and was ready to actually start doing things.
Right. I think that timeline is helpful. And thank you for answering all of our many questions. I feel like Kevin and I could ask you questions all day long. And I cannot wait to see your HBO movie with the Prius and the cows and all of these like awesome anecdotes. And you know, your neighbor cooking you that Italian meal. I can just foresee it being an HBO movie in a couple years. But the audience has a couple of questions that they've been thrown in the chat. So I want to kind of move into question and answer time so the audience has time to get their questions answered. So the first one is from George, and it says, what were some books that helped you with the fundamentals of building an ISP and networking?
I didn't, you know, I really didn't spend a lot of time reading books on doing that. You know, I ended up working for my first ISP in 1995. And I worked for this company called CICnet, which was one of the regional NSF networks that was, you know, funded from the National Science Foundation. So a lot of the original internet stuff came out of, you know, ARPA, DARPA type funding. And so I just spent a lot of time just learning, learning about that. But the book that actually got me into the, you know, was kind of the gateway into a lot of this stuff was one called The Cuckoo's Egg by Clifford Stoll. And what that covered was, that was one of the early, you know, computer hackers, you know, this was during the Cold War days and stuff, and kind of covered that. And, you know, I was reading about that as a early teenager, and went and talked about this Unix system. I was like, Unix? Well, that's probably going to be, you know, interesting and useful. And, you know, now, you know, and I was like, I'm going to go learn some stuff about that. And so I dialed up the local bulletin board system, you know, with modem, you know, probably 1200 baud or something back in the day, and went and did a search for Unix. And I found out there was actually some public access Unix servers that were a local call for me, you know, and that's how I got initially exposed to a lot of the networking stuff and Unix stuff. And, you know, for those of you who don't know, like, you know, almost all the technology that you're using today or interact with has some sort of Unix underpinning on it. Like if you have an Android phone that's running a version of Unix called Linux on there. And so it's, you know, it's a very common framework to exist in like almost all the technologies today. So I got very lucky in that.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next question is from Dennis. So to gauge the interest level, do you knock on every door or try to call a sort of town hall meeting to discuss with neighbors or potential customers in the original first year?
So I went and I sent letters to all of them, and that seemed to work out. One of the roads involved was a private road, and they had their their road association meeting coming up for deciding, I guess how much gravel or whatever to pour on the road. And they said, come on down, and we'll, and I talked to them about what I was doing and what I was planning to do, and got to meet all, everyone who was there at the house, because neighborhood things, not everybody shows up, but that worked out relatively well, and that's the case. When my contractors were out doing work, I gave them little flyers and cards to hand people as well. So in talking to a bunch of the other companies that do this, they say the number one piece of advertising is a construction crew working out in front of your house, or nearby.
You get someone coming outside asking, "Hey, what are you doing?" And spur up the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And the one crew, they go and when they're working, in the right of way in front of somebody's house, they go and they knock on the door and you say, "By the way, we're out here," and stuff like that. And I want, I've had people who wear, their phone lines or whatever, they're, have gotten cut or damaged when the contractor's working there, and I apologize to them and stuff like that. And I say, yeah, let me know if something's not quite right. And, afterwards. And so, we've gone back and we've added, grass seed and dirt in places where, they came in with a big machine when it was wet, and then later it was dry. And now there was a divot there in the person's yard. Their tractor their tractor they used for mowing got stuck there.
Awesome. So our next question is to try to make it easier to install. Are you looked at plug and play, such as Corning has introduced?
So I've looked at the different, like there's all the OptiTap and like the stuff where you can just go, like OTE type stuff where you can just go and screw on something. The issue is my customers, one of them, they have they're 2,000 feet off the road. And so for me to stock, or ask, Millennium to stock the variability of cables that I would need to be able to install or do a repair for that would be problematic. And so we end up custom making all of the drop cables that go up to the customer homes. Just because, one person might have, 50 feet to their house from the handhole or the tying location. Somebody else, like I said, is 2,000, they've got a 2,000 foot long driveway, with a culvert in the middle, like, and some drainage in the middle of it or something. And so, the construction necessary for each one is different. So yeah, those solutions, like they look interesting, but the areas I'm in, some of them
It's not practical.
It's not practical, I'm going, one of them I go 2,000 feet down the road and there's one house, and the next house is another 2,000 feet down the road. So, I guess that's like 3 2,000 foot drop cables I could have used maybe, but, that's, that ends up just really being complex. Just, and one of the other things is the customers really like to be able to pick where the boxes go on their house and where the cables run in their yard. And when you custom make the cable, you have that flexibility. You show up with a trailer full of cable, and you're able to go and run run something up to them specifically, and run it the way they want.
Gotcha.
We've got a question from Hitton. He wants to know how you're connecting your network to like another provider. What are you doing for internet?
Yeah, so I buy from 2 other local Michigan, I'm based in Michigan. I buy from 2 other Michigan providers. One of them is 123net, and the other is ACDnet. They both are sort of, they're not big national players, but they're definitely big regional players in the market. And so I get slightly different services from both of them. But I get internet access from the two of them, and we do we both meet in a handhole, in different handholes, about 2 miles north of my house. So, and just talking to, those companies and explaining what you're doing is really, is really helpful. You go and you say, hey, I can meet you here, I can meet you there. And, when one of them was running behind schedule and the other one called me and cold called me back one day and said, oh yeah, hey, we can do this. And they were worried about the permits. And it was funny because the permit drawings actually showed, yep, we're going to go up this pole, because I anticipated somebody, I would want to tie in at multiple places. So we put all of them on the permit drawings. And so they ultimately looked at it like, oh, wow, they were able to go and tie in there because it was already on the drawings. And so they were very excited about that.
If you're meeting them at a handhole, how are you managing that connection with them?
So that comes back on fiber into back to my head end, which is still my basement, and such there. So that comes back there, and then they either gave me the right optic. One of them's a DWDM optic, the other one's a bidirectional optic, because one of them they've got a mux in their splice case, and the other one we go back, a couple, a number of miles to them as well. So, meet them with slightly different technologies, both, but, that works out. The one provider, they really wanted to place a CPE device at my home. I happen to, because I've been doing big networking stuff, I told them, no, I really did not want to have, there's this, Cisco made this device, the Catalyst 6500, and you know how loud it is and how big it is. And I said, no, like, come back, either come back with something better or like offer me a different solution. And so, we went and, we figured out something else that works. And recently they re-architected some of their network, and, I had to do a little bit more config work that they probably would have done if they managed a device, here, but, it keeps my power bill down and the noise down. So, when the kids are gaming in the room next door, they, they're not hearing too much from my basement data center.
Yeah, that's actually in your house. Yeah, yet again, another reason for your HBO movie. Another question is, when you have to do aerial, do you try avoiding renting space from power poles and run your own poles?
I've considered that. One of the companies, so when we were boring one of the sections, a contractor got stuck a couple times, underground boring this rather complex area, and considered setting poles for that and such. But I've really wanted to not do anything aerial. So I have so far avoided ending up on anything aerial unless it's maintained by somebody else. But I have considered that, in a few places, just setting my own poles and stuff, because the poles aren't that expensive, in the big picture, but you do, it takes a lot of effort to do that. And I've climbed poles before. I don't like it personally, so I'd rather not.
That's what you got kids for, right?
Unfortunately, the one only recently turned 18, so
OSHA might have some issues with that.
Yeah. So if you're from OSHA, I lied about all the ages of my children. Because I value their privacy.
The next question is from Dave, and he must know you because he said at one point you were going to let me configure cake. Did you end up using that?
No, Dave. We should catch up soon. I saw him pop in as well on the video.
Yeah.
Because one of the, and hopefully none of my customers see this, but one of the big secrets as well for me ensuring I have good customer satisfaction is I don't actually shape any of them. So everyone everyone, the slowest piece of the network is actually in their house. So it's at least gigabit to their home.
Yeah.
And so that way everything is there on their side. And it looks like Dave was commenting in the chat on that too. So
yeah, he's following up with it, and I figured that's where he was going with it. So I kind of got a giggle out of it. But it was funny. That was one of the questions I had in my mind when you're talking. I was like, okay, I mean, you really don't have a high level of management when you pretty much got this set up as a wide open network. So I was curious if you had any real management tools from a client perspective. So you're just charging for whatever, right? You just charge them a monthly rate, and you don't, whatever they use. You're not monitoring it, nothing like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've got data on it. So, people sign up for their rate plan and such, but, because it's my secondary job, one of the goals is to have my phone not ring. And so, cause you're optimizing on all the things. And so I don't want my phone to ring. And that's a really, that is an important optimization on my side. Is I don't, anytime somebody calls you, that's, that costs you money, that costs you time. And so I don't shape them. I don't restrict what CPE they can use. A lot of them use either like these, I tend to recommend people get these, the Aero Pro series, because that tends to work out relatively well for them. It's fairly consumer friendly from that perspective, and they can manage it from their smartphone. I've gone and looked at, I've looked at a bunch of different systems. Like Calix has some CPEs, Nokia has some CPEs.
Yeah.
A lot of, smart home management stuff like that. But, like I said, on my side, the goal is, my goal is, because I buy and I deal with bandwidth stuff in my day job, and I know what the consumer actually uses because I can observe it. I know where I have some leeway, on this side. So yeah, the slowest connection is the gigabit Ethernet cable at their house. And in a couple of cases, one of them has this system called Arlo, which I never even heard of before.
Yeah.
And that one, for some reason, it looks like it's only syncing up at 100 megs. So, if they swap out their system to something that can do more than 100 meg, they'll see faster service. But one of the interesting things for me was at the beginning when I got my house connected, and I went and I looked at my bandwidth utilization. I hit play on the TV in my bedroom, and I watched the TV in my bedroom pull initially 150 megabits on the wired Ethernet connection there, just when it was pre-buffering everything. So, the ability to burst up on those speeds is really valuable.
For sure. Yeah. I got so many more questions.
We don't have enough time, Kevin.
I'm just fascinated by this because there's all sorts of requirements with, with content delivery and everything else. I have to ask, have you had anybody that was stealing content yet on your network, and you've had to help investigate that?
I've gotten the usual like DMCA notices and stuff like that. One of the things, for the more technically savvy customers, I've gone and approached them, and I can tell who they are, just because that's, I'd say that's my primary livelihood, is talking to people like that as well. So I can kind of, we can sniff each other out in those conversations. And I say, because they'll go and they'll be like, oh, well, can I, have a static IP address or this? And I'm like, well, if I give you a static IP address, like, you're going to be my first customer with that. And then if I ever change my network, it's more likely I'm going to break you. Do you really want a static IP address?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But, I've also told them, I'm like, yep, just don't BitTorrent stuff. Like, don't go and steal content, because, I don't want to have to turn you in. Yeah. And so it is that personal talking to. And so, but one of the people who I said that to, they went and, they gave me some fresh maple syrup from the trees on their property, that they had done. And then later they did get one DMCA notice that I had to go and I forwarded on to them. But it was definitely, one of those things. And then, I see somebody else, if that's the Ryan, who I think it is, yes, we have IPv6 support.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple remaining questions that we haven't had time to get to. So Jared, I'm curious if you're open for me dropping your email in the chat. So those people that we didn't get to answer their questions, if you're okay for them to send you a personal email. Some of them were about permitting and, a couple of resource sharing. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, and I did see one of them go by here, which I want to just personally, personally comment on, because I have a minute or two to go over.
I hope it's what actor's going to portray you.
So we can come back to that one in a second. So I will say, I saw the question go by in the chat about, like what did Millennium do to help me succeed? And this is one where I really want to say thank you, give a personal thanks here in public to Antoine, because he's really been essential to helping me succeed over here. He set me up with the contractor who's done the underground boring for me for the first 2 years. It helped me out with all the materials. Didn't laugh at me when I showed up in a Prius and I'm shoving it full of hand tools and stuff like that. And all that. So that's the type of thing where Millennium's done a lot of introductions for me to these other companies and such. And that just that has really been essential for my success, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without that, because I think it would have been hard for some of the contractors to take some guy seriously about doing stuff without that personal introduction. So that's one of the
Antoine and the rest of the team in Michigan are great people to work with, and I'm growing to love them. That's for sure.
Yeah, so they've really been essential to my success. And so when they take a call from me a few minutes after closing time, because I'm doing my day job and up till 5 o'clock, and I'm like that. It's that little, all those little touches and stuff like that that've really helped me succeed. So I just want, I wanted to comment on that. So that was.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I we talked about this before, and it wasn't meant to be any type of commercial plug for us.
No, but I
do really appreciate that. Yeah, we appreciate that feedback, and all that really belongs to to Antoine and the Michigan team, and they're great to work with. And so I really appreciate that. And I think on behalf of everybody on the call, I really appreciate your time. I feel like we need a part 2 or something, because I got like 1,000 questions I'd love to ask, and we've talked a couple times before this webinar. So I just want to thank you. Is there anything you wanted to wrap up with to say to everybody?
Thank you for coming. I hope you found it interesting.
Yeah.
It was fascinating, and I look forward to the HBO movie and whoever your actor may be.
Yeah, people are posting in their wins part 2 and stuff. So
yeah, awesome. Thank you, sir. We're much appreciated.
Thank you, Jared.
I'm sure we'll be in contact.
Yeah, thanks for putting this together and organizing it. It's fun.
Our pleasure.
All right.
Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.